Good morning. I'm doing a presentation on narcotic e-scripting and whether or not it's a nationwide trend, and in general the particular article, which is narcotic e-scripting law going inactive in the state of New York. So with this article, it describes New York State as having a law in place that's going active here at the end of March for all prescriptions to be e-scripts. The new law will require that even narcotics and regular prescriptions are sent e-script-wise. Law will affect both pharmacies and prescribers of medication. Minnesota was the first state to enact such a pharmaceutical law. We've seen e-scripting rising in the country for traditional non-narcotic drugs, but narcotics have a little bit more laws tied up with them as far as the DEA goes and the requirements for a more strict e-scripting profile. Resistance to the incoming rule, as with any change that we see in society, there are those that don't want to pursue this as a matter of cost, as a matter of public policy, as a matter of new technology. The reason I felt this article was important to the scanning of the environment was I felt it pertained to both the issues of healthcare, public policy, and a patient safety issue. The practice of e-prescribing affects all caregivers in the process of drug therapy. Policy itself requires efforts of multiple groups, DEA, governing bodies, multiple professions. Legitimately, really affects how we go to our regular pharmacy to receive our prescription. And the requirements of e-scripts, whether narcotic or not, provides, I think, a layer of patient safety that prevents overscripting, over opioid use, and duplicate therapies. The government has laid the groundwork and the framework for e-prescribing laws, but it's been an individual state-by-state decision to do so. Minnesota was the first state to enact such a law. New York is now the second state. With New York, they have a heavy burden of opioid users, drug abusers, and they felt that this kind of a law in their books would help to reduce opioids in the general community, overprescribing of opioids, and illegitimate use of opioids. Right now, nationwide, it's been suggested that over 3/4 of the nationwide pharmacies are prepared for doing e-scripting, but less than 2% of our nation prescribers are. Policy obviously would affect the DEA, pharmacies in general, prescribers of medications, the public, and officials that oversee both separate bodies of professionals. Nationwide, this second enacted state law places a spotlight on our nation's doctors and pharmacies. The legislatures who were able to mandate this and push this through the New York State obviously were involved. This policy affects doctors on the effort of requiring them to purchase new prescribing equipment, overseeing the establishment of it, making sure they're in compliance and accordance with the law. Pharmacies themselves have to appropriate the funds to meet the law. And this affects quite a number of these individuals. I think the article does a good job of addressing the law in New York State, and I think it does a good job of suggesting that this is a bigger ethics question for the entire nation. The author, M.M. Court, I think starts this article off with some particular bias. The title to the article alone suggests that e-scripting is this national movement that's being installed by doctors, and that's probably not quite the case. I think there's a bigger picture going on, and I think she does point towards that. The author does discuss the new law in New York State, Then she moves on to a more nationwide discussion on e-prescribing in general. I think with the bias that is in the article, she does support some of the resistant e-scripting by discussing cost involved, prescriptions that are needed for opioids that need to be now instead of later. E-scripting as a new technology that's going to have some breakdowns and glitches, just like when we all began learning how to use Google to search for things on the internet. We all began carrying a cell phone. There's going to be glitches and issues and breakdowns in the systems until we use it often enough that we get some of those out of there. And obviously, not all e-scripting computer systems are going to be developed where we'll be able to communicate with each other. So how do we make sure that there's an international connection with all that, with the eventual setup that will become e-prescription systems? My personal views, I do believe that e-prescribing is going to be the future of prescriptions, and it needs to be something nationwide and acted upon by Congress, just like we've done with the electronic patient information. I feel it's a huge patient safety issue, and it affects patients on the level of we can reduce potential over opioid use, we can reduce duplicative therapies. I think with all new technologies, yeah, there might be hiccups, but the more we use it, the more that we can work out some of those bugs and glitches. I feel that pharmacies and pharmacists in general are already on board with this new trend. Where I work, we've been using e-script systems for at least 3 or 4 years. I think the article states that 3/4 of the pharmacies across the U.S. are already set up for scripts, e-scripting. So I believe the pharmacists are on board for this new new trend, new movement, so to speak. And I think where we're seeing some stalling is with physicians. The article describes them as dragging their heels to a change. And I think we'll see that until a law is put on the books at a government level that affects how they prescribe, how they practice. I don't think doctors are going to be incentivized enough to make a change. And that's just my personal opinion. I think this article does a great job about saying, hey, look, New York's got this new law, it's going into act. Minnesota already did it. Why are we not doing it across the nation? Why are some states better at it than others? Why do some states have more e-script systems than other states? And what's the bigger picture here? Why are we as a nation not really pushing this through? It's a new technology. It's going to make things safer for patients. It's going to make drug adherence and prescribing of opioid drugs potentially better. Why are we not doing this? And that's a good question to throw out there and ask the general public, ask the national public, ask the legislatures, ask the doctors, ask prescribers, ask your pharmacist. It's a good question. Why aren't we all on board with this? Thank you for listening.